The dense jungles of the Pacific Islands created a unique combat environment, where engagements often occurred at distances of less than 30 yards. In these conditions, the United States Marine Corps deployed a weapon that would challenge all assumptions the Japanese forces had about modern warfare: the 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. While the historical record of its specific combat use remains limited, the presence of Winchester Model 1897 and Model 1912 shotguns in Marine units during the Pacific Campaign represented a tactical capability for which Japanese military doctrine had prepared nothing. The Imperial Japanese Army had spent decades preparing for war against Western powers. Its training manuals addressed British rifles, American machine guns, French mortar, and Soviet submachine guns, but shotguns, considered by them more as bird-hunting tools than instruments of war, never entered their tactical considerations. This oversight proved significant, as U.S. forces incorporated approximately 25,000 Model 97s and between 60,000 and 80,000 Model 12s into military service during World War II. Japanese military doctrine in 1942 focused on spiritual power overcoming material disadvantages. This philosophy was not mere propaganda, but a calculated response to industrial realities. Japan produced less steel in a year than the United States produced in a single month. The Imperial Army's solution was to make each soldier superior in close combat, where spirit and training would prevail over mechanized warfare. The tactical expression of this doctrine was the nighttime infiltration attack, followed by close-quarters combat with rifle and bayonet. Japanese infantry were extensively trained in these tactics, which had proven successful against Chinese forces, British troops in Malaya, and U.S. defenders in the Philippines. The standard engagement sequence was clear: approach under cover of darkness, infiltrate enemy lines, and then overwhelm defenders at close range, where Japanese superiority in hand-to-hand combat would be decisive. U.S. shotguns invalidated this tactical framework. At close range, where Japanese doctrine anticipated dominance, a Marine armed with a Winchester Model 97 could fire 6.0 buckshot rounds in approximately 2 seconds, using the gunner's rapid-fire capability. Each shell contained 99.33 mm pellets, creating a pattern that made missing nearly impossible in the dense jungle vegetation. The Winchester 1897, designed by John Browning and refined over 45 years of production, served as the primary Marine shotgun in the early Pacific campaigns. The military version featured a 20-inch barrel, a perforated heat shield, and a bayonet lug compatible with the M1917 sword bayonet. Most critically, the Model 97 lacked a trigger disconnector, allowing continuous fire while operating the pump mechanism. The Model 1912, developed by Winchester engineer T.C. Johnson, improved Browning's design with an internal hammer mechanism that prevented accidental discharges. By 1943, the Model 12 had largely replaced the Model 97 in Marine units. Though both remained in service throughout the war, military acquisition records show steady production, though specific combat deployment numbers remain undocumented. The ammunition fired by these weapons was as important as the guns themselves. Standard Uno buckshot loads contained 9 pellets, each weighing 53.88 grains and 8.38 mm in diameter. At 10 yards, the spread measured approximately 10 inches. At 20 yards, 20 inches. And at 30 yards, 30 inches. In jungle combat, where visibility rarely exceeded 30 yards, this spread compensated for the difficulty of aiming precisely in dense vegetation. The Guadalcanal campaign, August 1942 to February 1943, marked the first major U.S. offensive in the Pacific. Marines of the 1st Division landed with various weapons, including some shotguns, though their exact numbers and deployment are not recorded in official battle reports. The August 21, 1942, battle along Tenaru River actually Alligator Creek saw Colonel Kona Ichiki's 917-man detachment virtually annihilated, with 789 Japanese killed. While prominent in Pacific War narratives, primary sources attribute Japanese losses mainly to Browning M1917, water-cooled machine guns, and 37 mm anti-tank guns, firing shrapnel rounds, with only a passing mention of shotgun use. Throughout the Guadalcanal campaign, Marines employed shotguns primarily for perimeter defense and jungle patrols. Photographic evidence shows pointmen carrying Winchester shotguns during patrol operations, positioned to respond to ambushes in dense terrain. However, after-action reports overwhelmingly focus on machine guns, rifles, and artillery as the primary weapons influencing battle outcomes. The Guadalcanal jungle created unique challenges for all weapons, particularly shotguns. Standard paper-cased shotgun shells absorbed moisture in humid conditions, swelling to the point of being impossible to chamber. This problem persisted throughout the Pacific Campaign until brass-cased shells were adopted. Tropical humidity created a critical ammunition issue that nearly negated the effectiveness of shotguns. Commercial paper-cased shells swelled in 100% humidity, rendering previously easy to-load rounds unusable. Marines reported having 2 hammer shells into chambers a practical impossibility during combat. This crisis persisted until March 29, 1945, when the M19 brass 12-gauge 00 buckshot shell was officially adopted. These brass shells, with moisture-resistant covers, restored shotgun reliability in the war's final months. The late adoption explains why many Pacific veterans rarely mention shotguns in their memoirs. For much of the war, ammunition problems severely limited effectiveness. The U.S. Army formalized shotgun training through Technical Manual TM9 to 285. Published September 21, 1942. It covered Winchester Models 97 and 12, Remington Model 11, Stevens Models 520 and 620, and Ithaca Model 37. Training occurred at Camp Pendleton, California, Camp Leroyne, North Carolina, and Parris Island, South Carolina. Instruction emphasized specific combat applications, point security during patrols, rapid response in night defense, clearing caves and bunkers, and prisoner guard duties. Marines learned the Model 97's unique rapid-fire technique, though instructors warned against over-reliance due to ammunition consumption and barrel heating. The Marine Corps Table of Organization E-100, effective 1943, authorized 306 shotguns per division, mainly assigned to military police companies, pioneer battalions, and select rifle squads for specialized tasks. This allocation meant that, while shotguns were present in all major Marine operations, they represented less than 2% of a division's small arms. The historical record reveals a surprising absence. Japan never lodged formal diplomatic protests over U.S. shotgun use, contrasting sharply with Germany's September 1918 complaint that shotguns violated the Hague Convention. German protests claimed shotguns caused unnecessary suffering and threatened to execute captured Americans carrying them. Japanese military documents captured during and after the war make no mention of shotguns requiring special countermeasures. Training materials focused on countering US firepower in general machine guns, artillery, and flamethrowers but never identified shotguns as weapons, warranting specific tactical responses. This absence suggests that, while some Japanese soldiers undoubtedly encountered shotgun fire, the weapons never achieved sufficient tactical impact to merit official attention. Post-war interrogations of Japanese officers also lack references to shotguns as particularly problematic. Officers spoke of US material superiority, overwhelming firepower, and effective combined arms tactics, but shotguns appear nowhere in these assessments. This silence contrasts sharply with extensive Japanese documentation on countering U.S. flamethrowers, which did lead to specific tactical adaptations. During the New Guinea Campaign, 1942 to 1945, Army and Marine units operated in some of the most challenging terrain of the war. The 32nd and 41st Infantry Divisions requested shotguns based on Marine experiences in Guadalcanal, the dense jungles of New Guinea, where visibility often measured in single-digit yards, theoretically offered ideal conditions for shotgun use. However, the same ammunition problems that plagued Marines on Guadalcanal were even worse in New Guinea's highlands. Constant rain, river crossings, and extreme humidity rendered cardboard shell boxes almost entirely unreliable. Units that had requested shotguns often left them in rear areas, relying instead on M1 Garands, Thompson submachine guns, and Browning automatic rifles. Army experience in New Guinea demonstrated that weapons effective on paper did not always translate into practical combat effectiveness. While shotguns excelled in training exercises and controlled conditions, the harsh realities of jungle warfare exposed critical limitations not resolved until brass ammunition arrived in 1945. As the Pacific War progressed, Marine units developed specific tactical doctrines for shotgun employment. Shotguns proved most valuable in 3 roles: patrol point security, perimeter defense against infiltration, and prisoner guard duties. For patrol operations, designated scouts carried shotguns as lead elements prepared to respond to ambushes with immediate, devastating firepower. The Army's 37th Infantry Division bore the brunt of Manila combat, using shotguns in room-to-room fighting, though after-action reports highlight flamethrowers and demolition charges as primary weapons for reducing Japanese strongpoints. Weapons were most effective in surprise encounters, less so in deliberate assaults. During the February 1945 invasion of Iwo Jima, 3 Marine divisions deployed 918 authorized shotguns. However, volcanic ash, tunnel systems, and fortified positions created combat conditions in which shotguns played a minimal role. The famous flag raising on Mount Suribachi occurred after flamethrower and demolition teams cleared Japanese positions, not through shotgun attacks. Marines employed primarily flamethrowers to clear caves, supported by specialized flame tanks. The M222 flamethrower could project ignited fuel 40 yards into cave complexes, far exceeding shotgun range. Of the 26,000 U.S. casualties at Iwo Jima, records attribute none specifically to a lack of shotgun firepower or shotgun tactics failures. The adoption of brass M19 ammunition came too late to significantly impact Iwo Jima operations. Shotgun shells reached some units in late March 1945, after the battle's conclusion. Marines still fought with swollen paper shells, further limiting shotgun use in one of the war's fiercest battles. The Battle of Okinawa, April-June 1945, saw the full implementation of lessons learned throughout the Pacific Campaign. Marines relied primarily on coordinated infantry tank tactics, with flame tanks providing close support. Robert Leckie's memoir also omits discussion of shotguns despite service with the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal. These omissions suggest shotguns played a peripheral rather than central role in Marine combat experience. Available references describe shotguns as valuable in specific situations, not as primary combat weapons. Veterans appreciated them for night security in jungle ambushes, but highlighted rifles, machine guns, and mortar as battle-determining weapons. This perspective aligns with official records showing shotguns representing less than 2% of division small arms. U.S. industry produced a substantial number of military shotguns during World War II. Winchester manufactured approximately 25,000 Model 97 rifles and between 60,000 and 80,000 Model 12 rifles for military contracts. Remington, Stevens, and Ithaca contributed thousands more. This production capability demonstrated U.S. industrial power, but did not necessarily translate into combat use. Many shotguns served in training centers, guard units, and rear area security, rather than frontline combat. Military police needed shotguns for prisoner handling and convoy security. Navy ships carried them for boarding operations and security. Air bases used shotguns for perimeter defense. These necessary but non-combat roles absorbed much of production. The disconnect between production figures and combat accounts suggests that, although the United States could have armed every Marine squad with shotguns, practical limitations, ammunition problems, tactical restrictions, and doctrinal preferences meant most remained in secondary roles. Shotguns functioned as specialized tools, rather than standard combat arms. Shotgun use in World War II can also be examined from the perspective of tactical doctrine and individual Marine training. Technical Manual, TM 9-285, outlined explicit roles for shotguns, but practical implementation varied. Experienced combat leaders prioritized reliable, long-range weapons for jungle patrols, often relegating shotguns to specialized functions such as point security or cave clearing. Training emphasized rapid-fire techniques, but Marine units frequently reported that ammunition shortages or swelling paper shells prevented routine deployment. Units carrying shotguns often retained them as secondary weapons or assigned them to select members for defensive operations rather than continuous combat. The psychological effect of the shotgun should not be underestimated. In close-quarters engagements, the distinctive sound of a pump-action shotgun produced both surprise and fear. Marines reported that Japanese forces sometimes retreated after encountering shotgun fire, indicating its intimidation value. While not a primary factor in battle outcomes, this psychological impact contributed to localized tactical success, particularly in night defense and jungle ambushes. As the war progressed, the U.S. military refined logistical approaches to shotgun deployment. The M19 brass-cased 12-gauge 00 buckshot shell resolved many early issues with paper-cased ammunition. These shells were moisture-resistant, reliable in tropical conditions, and compatible with both Model 97 and Model 12 shotguns. Introduction of the M19 in 1945 coincided with the final stages of the Pacific War, but its deployment was limited by production timelines and transport challenges. By mid-1945, the combined effects of terrain, enemy tactics, and weapon reliability meant that shotguns were used selectively. On Iwo Jima and Okinawa, Marines preferred flamethrowers, demolition charges, and coordinated rifle and machine gun fire to reduce fortified positions. Shotguns were employed primarily in mop-up operations or security assignments, reflecting their secondary combat role despite theoretical potential. In conclusion, the role of the shotgun in the Pacific War was complex. While technically capable of devastating close-range firepower, environmental challenges, doctrinal limitations, and logistical constraints prevented widespread battlefield dominance. Historical records and veterans' accounts indicate that shotguns were valuable for specialized roles, particularly night defense, point security, and prisoner management. However, they were not decisive in major engagements, and their impact was often overshadowed by rifles, machine guns, artillery, and flamethrowers. The legacy of the shotgun in the Pacific War illustrates the interplay between weapon technology, doctrine, and environment. A weapon highly effective in theory may prove limited by practical conditions, such as humidity, terrain, or enemy adaptations. Shotguns offered Marines a tactical option previously unknown to Japanese forces. Yet environmental realities and operational doctrine confined their use to secondary roles. Despite production numbers sufficient to arm entire divisions, the shotgun remained a niche weapon valued, situational, and carefully allocated rather than standard issue. The historical silence surrounding shotgun use in primary combat accounts does not diminish its significance as a specialized tool of war. For the Marines who trained with, carried, and occasionally fired shotguns in the Pacific jungles, these weapons provided a combination of firepower, intimidation, and psychological security. The shotgun's story in World War II is one of potential versus practicality, an American innovation that confronted Japanese doctrine, yet ultimately constrained by the realities of the Pacific theater.